I just subscribed. On another note, it would be interesting to hear your life story. Welcome back and thanks for being here. My name is Scott and I guess it's time to share a little about myself, but not too much. I think that could be too long of a video, especially if I answer 20 questions. It might be too revealing or maybe even a bit boring. For example, I don't drink alcohol and I've never tried drugs, not even the green stuff, and that alone might portray me as being fairly vanilla. And while I do have some interesting hobbies like the bicycles here, some thoughts, opinions, and things to say, I prefer to limit specifics to people that I know personally. I believe in knowing my audience instead of blindly spewing my opinions or colorful language to people that I don't know or cannot see. I guess the age-old avoidance of politics and religion comes to mind too. I don't bring viewers here for any of that, so I avoid certain topics or words that could trigger the social overlords here in YouTube. I don't think that decision diminishes my content since I don't discuss politics, religion, or other topics that may require me to tiptoe around my word choices. For example, my choice to say green stuff or to avoid the C word is done to avoid having certain labels appear on my video. With that said, I'll answer a few questions that could give you some insight into more about me. So let's start with a couple of car questions that share my thought process when considering cars. Many who know that I come from the TDI community ask, why did you ditch your Jetta TDI? I had a lot of great success with my '98 Jetta TDI. I kept that car for 20 years and it had 445,000 miles on it. But I was reluctant to buy the newer TDIs because of the sporadic issues people were having with intercooler sludging, intercooler icing, EGRs clogging, and DPFs cracking. Those issues were likely a very small percentage of owners, which is why I took a leap of faith and bought a pair of new 2014 Jetta TDIs. Each car did have a few hiccups that were never diagnosed, and I wondered if they were experiencing the onset of intercooler sludging or EGR clogging. Regardless, I became pretty quickly bored with mine, even with a stage 2 tune. Once Dieselgate happened, I saw nothing but an opportunity for two automotive do-overs with the good payouts that Volkswagen was giving. I wasn't upset or angry at VW over Dieselgate. The clean diesels had met my expectations, that being free of smoke. Still, I didn't have faith in Volkswagen's fixes, which were actually still being developed at the time, and I didn't really have a lot of faith in their extended warranties either. I sold back both 2014 Jetta TDIs and used the generous payouts from Volkswagen to replace them free and clear with my 2017 GTI and a 2018 Jetta SE for my wife. What's not to like about two new cars with no car payments? I never looked back. I used to smugly boast about my TDI's fuel economy and torque, particularly with its tune. Driving my GTI for the first time, even stock, put an instant smile on my face and had me wondering, why did I wait so long to get a GTI? Sure, fuel costs exactly double, but my tuned GTI is totally worth the operating expense for the extra driving pleasure. It eclipses my TDI in every way except fuel economy. My wife's Jetta SE gets slightly lower fuel economy than the TDI, but costs less to refuel due to the price difference between regular unleaded gas and diesel. Mile for mile, the SE with 1.4 turbo costs almost exactly the same as driving a TDI. I have no regrets whatsoever about my purchase decisions. Another popular question, what are your thoughts about the Mark 8? Will you buy one? My initial thought was that the body styling looks a little bloated, but it's growing on me. I don't care for the new plaid pattern, and that might compel me to consider leather. I think the Mark 8 continues Volkswagen's reputation for making each platform better than its predecessor. However, there are two things that I can see right away that steer me away from the Mark 8. First, I'm still very pleased with my Mark 7. That's not a fault of the Mark 8, that's more of a testament for the Mark 7. It's a fantastic car. So I wouldn't sell it just to have the latest thing. But kind of a big thing is Volkswagen's changes to the infotainment system and steering wheel controls. Both appear to have removed the hard buttons and knobs and replaced them with touch panels. And yes, this old man should get with the times, but hear me out. Several car reviewers have lamented this change as well. I'll link a particularly honest review right up here. In short, hard buttons allow drivers to feel their selections before committing to a press. Touch surfaces require drivers to take their eyes off the road to make that selection, which is a terrible idea that seems counterintuitive to driving safely. It also appears that the touch surfaces are prone to accidental selections. For example, if you hover over a button and you don't mean to touch it yet, it'll still just detect that static part from your hands and activate the selection anyway. And that's been said to be very annoying. Perhaps Volkswagen will fix that in a facelifted car in a few years. Until then, the Mark 8 is out for me, especially while I still enjoy my Mark 7. And to be honest, I'm watching the electrics. I'm intrigued by the ID Buzz and think that the ID3 could be a great replacement for a GTI. But I expect both to be priced out of my budget, and I also think that they will feature the same touch interfaces that I dislike in the Mark 8. Okay, this question was asked in one of my polls where I asked about future content and my next car. Have you considered selling the car outright? Now, this question was asked prior to our current chip or semiconductor shortage and today's inflated used car prices. Back then, and more so today, my answer is a very firm no. I still thoroughly enjoy my GTI and find it to be right where I like it. I mean, sure, I could get top dollar for it in today's used car market, but then I'd have to pay top dollar for its replacement and then work to modify it. I'm going to stay right where I am and drive this car until it's worthless and too much hassle to keep on the road. And notice I said and. I don't mind driving a $1,000 car if it still brings me joy and is reliable, as my Mark III was for 16 years. Okay, those are some thought processes about me and my cars. Here are a few answers about me personally. What year did you serve in the military and what branch? Now, I'm not sure where I mentioned my military service. I don't hide it, but I also don't boast or promote it since I don't choose to define myself by what I used to be. Anyway, I served in the U.S. Coast Guard from 1986 to 2016, just over 30 years. I was a non-rate for 2 years and then spent 18 years as a fire control technician, which was a very small specialized weapons field in the Coast Guard. There were only 200 of us in the entire Coast Guard at any time, and only 10 locations where I could serve. As a result, the vast majority of the Coast Guard has never met an FT. The rating was absorbed into the electronics technician rating in 2003. I served my last 10 years in personnel and electronics management positions. Without a doubt, the Coast Guard is part of my personal heritage and helped to form the man I am today. I even worked on Coast Guard contracts for 5 years after leaving the service. However, I drive through life today without advertising my past or leaning on my veteran status to establish any perceptions about myself today. This question comes from my Helix video. This is sick. Where and how did you learn to do this? Well, I've had an interest in stereo systems since I was a teenager. As subwoofers and mobile audio systems became more popular in the 1980s, I decided to have a system installed in my first new car in 1989. It sounded great for its budget, and the installer made it look really good. However, the system developed a problem a few years later. I had transferred across the country by then, so I couldn't take it back, but I was a competent technician and decided to troubleshoot it on my own. I was horrified by the rat's nest of wires that was hidden behind and within the false panel, the false wall that was in my trunk. And that was when I decided that all future electronics work would be done on my own. We've heard the saying, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. I'm sure that not all service is bad, but I lack the time to find quality installers who are also affordable. So I do it all myself. I get what I want, and I save a lot of money in the process. And by the way, that problem was caused by a sheetrock screw that the installer had driven through the wall and then into an amplifier patch cord. He was such a pro. Somewhat related, you seem so fastidious with your car and projects. What motivates you to do such an excellent job? And I think years of seeing and paying for workmanship that is beneath my standards has been a huge motivator. As with the story I just shared, I've seen other projects where I paid good money only to find the effects of lazy workers or people who simply had no pride in their workmanship. And this is, say, around the house, not just in my car. There was even a time when I took my old Mark III to a body shop to have them address a flaw in some paintwork that they had done. It's called denibbing. They fixed the nibs, but I found a small scratch nearby. So I took it to the shop to see if they could fix it, and the shop manager actually said, yes, we can fix that, but I got to tell you that new damage can occur anytime a car comes back into the shop. And that just dumbfounded me, that they're basically saying don't bring it back because we'll keep on screwing it up. And this was a place that a local Mercedes dealer had recommended. So much for perceived high quality standards. So the trend in lowered standards, it's disheartening, especially in areas where I cannot do the work myself and have no idea what to expect in the end. What discipline of engineer are you? I get this question from time to time, and that's possibly due to my analytical approach to things, but I'm no engineer. As mentioned earlier, I was a technician for 20 years, including 2 instructor tours. I endeavored to learn my training material and to understand how my systems worked. I was prepared for any sharpshooting students who might try to stump me. After all, I too was a very analytical student who asked technical questions, so I wanted to be ready for it all. I think I have the mind of an engineer, especially considering that I overthink a lot of things, but I don't have the training or education of an engineer. How do you deal with any damage that happens to your car? Do you immediately just get it fixed, or do you learn to live with it? It almost seems as if your GTI could sit on a showroom floor in its condition. I appreciate that compliment. And so while this is a car question, my answer says something about me. So yes, for the most part, I do take care of damage as soon as I can. I think of the broken windows theory. I think that comes into play. Broken windows is a theory about crime, but it could impact the thinking behind owners and car shops as well. For example, if I let my car decay over time, then I may be less inclined to take care of it. Well, it's just an old heap, right? And shop mechanics may be less inclined to take special care of a mediocre car too. So I wash the car before it goes to the shop, including the engine if I think it needs it. And as a result, I think the mechanic is less likely to feel like they're working on a junker if it's maintained, cleaned, and shiny. Plus, I'm sure they appreciate not having to chisel their way through layers of caked grime in the engine bay or under the car. If it looks good, they'll treat it good. At least that's what I think. I could be wrong, but it seems to work. And by the way, my car is not perfect, not with over 140,000 miles, but I do address problems if I can. Some flaws do stay because the cost of repair is not worth the benefit. Tell us about your family. And I get variations of that question. And that's a bit of a loaded question, but I did kind of open myself up to that when I shared my road trip to bury my mother and to include time with my wife. And so there are some details that I will keep private because I prefer to share certain details only with personal friends. If you watched the Coast to Coast series, then you can conclude that I come from a broken family since my mother was in California and my dad lives in Texas. Those broken families have created new families from other broken families, I guess. So one thing I can say is that we have, although we're broken, we have brought other families together to create a new family. One baffling fact about my dad's household is that I am the oldest of 5 boys, and none of us have the same 2 parents. So yeah, go wrap your brain around that one. I grew up near Houston, and then I left when I was 18 and joined the Coast Guard. I return to my home state of Texas every couple of years or so, depending on available time and money. And I always drive, especially now that flying has new challenges. I've been married for over 30 years to a kind woman who has a great sense of humor, and part of her humor has been thrust upon her since, well, she kind of has to have a sense of humor to be married to me. I have a warped sense of humor that's kind of dark, which can either be fun or simply disastrous. Some of you have caught on to my dry humor, and I appreciate that. We have a grown daughter who's currently serving in the U.S. Marine Corps as an aviation ground support equipment mechanic, and she's a cool kid who definitely marches to her own drum. I hope that I've taught her to think for herself and to cut her own path, at least as much as one can within the constraints of military life. We are a Volkswagen family, and oddly enough, we all drive manual transmissions. Shockingly, I might be the first to ditch the third pedal after 37 years of driving sticks, but that won't be for several years if things continue to go well with this GTI. We've lived in Virginia since 2003 and had been stationed here in the early 90s as well. I'd like to sell the house and return to Texas, but I'm also inclined to wait for various markets and social climates to settle, if they will. All right, so my FAQ series is called 20 questions, which just may be too many for one setting. Most of my answers are pretty quick, but I'm not even halfway through 20 questions at this point, and to be honest, I can't think of 10 more questions that I want to answer about myself. A few little odds and ends that I'll share. I'm fairly analytical and dispassionate, perhaps to a fault, and sometimes to a huge fault, since my wife and I are polar opposites on those fronts. I still maintain my military haircut because it's so easy. In fact, I need a haircut right now. It's great for avoiding helmet head. I ride a bicycle and I used to do auto sports. I still wear a uniform of sorts. It's just in the form of polo shirts, t-shirts, shorts, cargo pants, or fleece jackets, all of which are like branded or styled the same. Go through and look at some of my old videos and you'll see that all of my polo shirts look just like this or just different colors. So I guess I like keeping things simple and efficient. I have some addictive behaviors. Sometimes I like to say anything worth doing is worth overdoing. Just check out my electronics package for proof of that. Anyway, having addictive behaviors makes it kind of a blessing that I've never been into drugs or alcohol, because I'd probably overdo it and kill myself. But I do struggle with my weight though. I like food, so I could overdo it. I have to watch what I eat, and especially sodas. I am glad to have been soda-free for almost 2 years now. I could overdo things with my car, but my commitment to staying out of debt is possibly the only thing saving me. That and my preference toward conservative styling, because I could get kind of stupid with suspension and graphics and body kits and all kinds of stuff like that. Anyway, I think that's enough. Feel free to ask questions if you have them, but I can't promise an answer. As I said earlier, there are some topics that I will not address, either because I don't want to discuss them with the world, or because there are some topics that I choose to keep to myself. I don't expect everyone to listen to what I have to say. Likewise, I don't think everyone is entitled to an answer about everything. I appreciate your understanding on that. Next time, I'll talk about the car, I promise. Thanks for watching. Take care.